G'day, wherever you are, welcome to another episode of our show, which is titled The Next Big Thing. And by that, we mean you, the listener, are very much the next big thing. And through the course of this journey, we have inspiring guests, awe-inspiring guests that come on the show and share their wonderful stories with us, aimed at inspiring us to do more with our lives. So today, again, I'm very excited. We have someone all the way from New York, the Big Apple, who's joining us late on a Friday night. Multi-talented. The word prodigy gets attached to very, very few musicians, and she is one of them. So it is an absolute privilege to speak to a prodigy who has flowered into a mesmerizing musician. She's performed multiple times at Carnegie Hall, and she is seen as the poster child of bringing jazz, modern jazz, and Indian classical music together. So to speak more about this wonderful fusion, please welcome, without further ado, Charu Suri. Charu, thank you for joining us all the way from New York.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Sriram. Technically, I'm in New Jersey, but it's
you're
the
in New
same
Jersey, right? Well, I got the new part, right?
part right now. It's such an honor to be on your podcast. Thank you for having me, really.
Fantastic. Great to hear. And as discussed with you on the show, we start off with a very typical icebreaker, if you may call it that. It really helps me and even the listeners to get to know the guests better. Is that you share two things about yourself. One is fact, one is fiction. You don't tell me which one's which, and I have to guess which one's fact and which one's an outlandish lie about yourself.
Okay.
So you happy to go ahead?
All right, I'm going to give it a go. All right. The first statement is I am an unbelievable cook of the Indian food, but great.
Right.
Second one is Yo-Yo Ma performed a piece I wrote when I was a teenager.
Wow. Okay.
So.
Okay, and this is a difficult one because if you are a good cook and you cook that up, then it's both, you see. So okay, yeah, it's a tough one. And so at what age was the second fact again? Can you a second statement again? Sorry, at what age did Yo-Yo Ma perform?
I composed when I was a teenager.
So he performed with you?
A piece that I composed.
Oh, he performed a piece that you composed when you were a teenager. Now, okay, Yo-Yo Ma is a child prodigy himself, so I'm guessing that child prodigy meets child prodigy is a fact. So Yo-Yo Ma did perform a composition of yours when you were a teenager. I'm going with that as fact.
You're correct. That is the fact.
Oh, yeah. And what about your cooking skills? Is that
they're horrible?
Non-existent. Okay.
They're non-existent, but I'm a decent cook.
Yeah.
But
okay.
My friends who are Indian and who cook, they are like, "Oh my God, Charu's invited us to dinner. Shall we do takeout today?"
I think what's happening here is, including yourself, you and your friends are comparing your cooking with your prodigious musical talent.
I don't know what's happening, but every time I invite people over for dinner, they're like, I'm going to take a range.
What's for dinner? Ragas.
Can't do it anymore.
That's hilarious. That is so funny. That's so funny. All right. Well, hopefully
working on that. Yeah.
That's okay. Look, you work on mesmerizing us with your beautiful music. You know, the food issue will get fixed. But tell us about the Yo-Yo Ma thing. How did that happen? You know, when and how old were you, and how did that whole thing come to life?
I was 18 years old, and I had gone to Princeton, and I had taken this wonderful course. I think 18 or 19. But I had taken a course called the Atelier, which was created by the amazing novelist Toni Morrison in Princeton. And she is like one of my heroes. She's a visionary. She's a genius. She dreamed of bringing artists together, and not necessarily in the same discipline. So she had a course we had to apply called the Atelier, where she paired a writer with a musician. And yeah, it was actually a beautiful
So when you say writer, a novelist writer, not a songwriter, but a writer.
Poetry in this instance.
Okay.
And the idea was to create something organically beautiful at the end of the semester and give a concert with the Princeton Chamber Orchestra. And, I got paired with the wonderful poet who had written 2 to 3 just wonderfully sublime poems about loss and love and flowering of life. I can't recall exactly what the text was, but I was very drawn to the text and it really spoke to me. So I composed a piece for chamber orchestra along with the vocalist. And I think it was just amazing because for that concert, she had invited both Yo-Yo Ma and Edgar Meyer, the double bassist, to perform my pieces with the chamber orchestra.
So did it feature your pieces or was the whole gig your work?
I had a whole...
Yep.
I was featured as the composer. Yep. So wow. And there were 4 other people. So it was a showcase of 4 pieces and 4 composers. We were all paired with different writers. And after my pieces were done, Edgar Meyer, I remember, took me aside and he's like, you can never stop composing. This is what you were meant to do.
Wow.
And I didn't take him seriously. I said, ha, ha, ha. Okay, wonderful, Edgar. I mean, it was sort of like, you're kidding me moment, right? And it was great to interact with both of them. They were so much fun to work with. No airs at all. They were there for the music and the music alone. And they were hugely complimentary of my work. And they encouraged me going. And, Toni Morrison said the same thing. And she's, she was very much a generous, unselfish spirit, such a passionate, powerful woman. So I've never forgotten that experience. It was like one of those key moments in my life that I keep replaying in my head every time I'm like down or if I don't feel good one day about my work. I always replay that moment. And there's some key moments like that in my life that have given me that inspiration and impetus to keep going.
Of course. Yeah, that's fascinating to have such towering personalities.
Yes.
Support your work. And that's a huge statement in itself. So I'm glad that you eventually took Edgar Meyer's words seriously.
After lots of rebellion, it took a lot of rebellion on my part to get to that moment. But yes, eventually, you're right.
Fantastic. Let's go back to the very start. Now, I am to understand that you are recognized as a prodigy, as a child prodigy, as a prodigious talent. And I believe you and the piano met when you were about 3 or 5, something like that? 5.
5.
Okay.
My father had a job as the CEO of a record label in Nigeria.
Oh. Okay.
So I was born in India.
Right.
Our family uprooted to go to Nigeria, where he was the CEO of a record label.
Right.
And the house that we were living in had a piano. That was when I was 5 years old. And my mom keeps telling me this, like, we can't explain it. It was like a freak thing. You just started playing that instrument and you never stopped. And I would practice for hours. And when I say hours, I'm talking 10 to 12 hours. Sometimes on an average day, at least 7 to 8 hours, uninterrupted, like just maybe playing, going get a sip of water, maybe a bite to eat, but just coming back and playing.
And were you inadvertently composing, or were you playing stuff you'd heard?
I was inadvertently composing as well. I was playing the classics. They put me immediately with a great teacher. I picked up stuff very quickly. I won a piano competition when I was international competition when I was 15.
Wow.
Started concertizing at the age of 7 and big stages at 9.
Wow.
And I was really determined to hone my virtuosic skills. I wish I had that discipline to practice right now, because I was sort of like a gymnast, was training for the medal, like really, really focused on the piano. I know I can't explain it either. It just was. So
yeah. But
nobody asked.
I reckon you put in all those hard yards in early, and now it's time to, it's maturing. The loan's matured now, so you can withdraw. So
it's a different mindset that I have right now. Yeah, definitely.
And so tell us about that mindset, right? And I must congratulate you. And where I'm going with this is, congratulations on your upcoming release of Rags and Ragas, another melting pot of jazz and Indian classical. And I'm sure it's much more than that, and I'll let you sort of describe the album. But that's hitting digital stores and the world on the 7th of September, and the first singles coming out on the 18th of August. So very exciting times for you, and I believe you will be submitting that to the Grammys this year as well. So tell us about your current mindset.
It's just been incredible, because that album, I think it's my best work yet, and I have legends on it, and we're talking legends, really the best of the best in the music industry. John Patitucci, who's a longtime bass player with Chick Corea, he is on every track.
Yep. Oh, fantastic.
And Steve Gadd, very drummer, he plays on 2 tracks. Joe from Preservation Hall is on almost every track except 1. And we have Kobe Arad, a very talented Israeli pianist who I have really grown to love and respect and admire his prodigious improvisation skills. He does a bebop, a makam-based improvisation over Raga Rag No.1, which is releasing on August 18th. And Berta Moreno plays the saxophone, and Lonnie Park, who is a 3-time Grammy Award winner, a dear friend of mine now, has done the mixing and mastering. And the illustrious Brent Fisher, who is the son of Claire Fisher, who did a lot of arrangements himself for Michael Jackson and Prince. And Brent is a genius in his own right. He has arranged one of the ragas, Raga Bhupali, on one of the tracks.
Fantastic.
Raga Bhupali, it's done an amazing job. It really is it's a treasure trove of stellar performers, and I am so blessed to have that. And it's co-produced by my dear friend from India, Devin Akambram. He's one of the co-producers on this album, along with Kobe and Brent. But more than anything, it's, if we focus on the music, this album is the most varied in the assortment of ragas that I've used. There are morning ragas, afternoon ragas, evening ragas, late evening ragas. There's an ode to Miles Davis based on Raga Bhageshri.
Wow.
There is a groovy New Orleans rhythm with Raga Bhupali that was arranged by Brent. And there's a fantastic raga, Heyman, funky, groovy. Steve Gadd the drums, where I'm like, oh my God, is that really Rupa Kathala?
Wow.
It's Kathala meets jazz in a funky way that you've never heard before. And, Steve takes it to places that I could never have dreamed of. So, I mean, in terms of like and people have listened to it, the sneak peek, and said, my God, we never thought a raga could roll like that.
Be expressed like that. Very, very fascinating. So where is this raga element coming from? So were you trained in Carnatic music or Hindustani music, or?
I was. So when I started learning my musical journey, my family is very musical. My grandmother is an amazing singer. She could have gone, easily had a career like, you know, MS Subbulakshmi or Lata Mangeshkar.
Wow.
But yes, she was very, very wonderful voice. But she, you know, had a family and she put that on pause, like a lot of women do, and a lot of men. But, you know, that was more common at the time. So I learned the Veena and I learned Carnatic music because that was the way to get introduced to music in India, at least in South India, where I was from. The fact that I gravitated to Western music and embraced Chopin and Mozart, my parents were like, okay, I mean, I guess that's what she's doing. But yes, I had a training in ragas as well, not by any stretch of the imagination as deep as some of the other singers and instrumentalists that I've heard. They go all in. I was very superficial. My knowledge of the world is very peripheral. But when I started composing, especially for jazz, I knew I didn't want to be a carbon copy of every other sound that I've heard. As beautiful as the songbook is, I've written in the song style. As beautiful as I've heard, you know, Billie Holiday and all the other greats, I didn't want to have the same approach. I wanted to be me. And it took a long time for me to find that me, my voice. And that's one of the biggest compliments I get, and is like, you really sound like you. No, there's nobody else that sounds like you.
Fantastic. Wow, what a wonderful space to be in.
Yes, and that's really, I feel very honored that many said, including jazz critics. And initially when I started doing this, I was just like, I don't know what the heck. Maybe people like it. Maybe people want. Then I started giving concerts and people came out to me saying, wow, you've made Indian music super approachable.
Wow.
You've also made classical music super approachable, because there's elements of classical music in my work because of training.
Yeah.
And I feel really happy, you know, that it's sort of like I've bridged the divide a little bit.
That's so fascinating. I'm very fascinated with the whole East meets West concept. And as you know, we put out an album last year, and we did our own interpretation of East meets West according to our experiences and sensibilities.
Yeah.
And it was what it was, and you know, we enjoyed putting it out, and I believe you connected with the album as well, which is
it was great. It was wonderful. It was one of the best albums I listened to last year, so well done.
Wow, that is such a big thing to say. Thank you very much. No, we're really pleased with how it came out and appreciate the feedback we got. But yeah, we're quite fascinated with that East meets West, and here you are taking that East meets West to a completely different level, and I dare say it's levels and heights that we probably haven't heard. So in doing so, you're creating a new sound. So kudos, big time kudos to you.
Thank you so much. It was I didn't really know how the response would be, but in my head I had simultaneously, you know, the swing of Oscar Peterson, the lyricism of Bill Evans, the finesse of Mozart, and the ragas all going through simultaneously in my head. And I was just, how, you know, that's the world that I heard. So I was delighted to find that other people resonate with it.
Yes. Slightly cliched question, but I am genuinely curious about this. And then when you have so many esteemed and established musicians coming in, and I'm guessing, you know, how does this collaboration process really work? Because I'm sure they all want the best for the album and they all come in with their ideas. So you, as I guess the main producer of the album, how do you sort of make sure that you take everyone's feedback, you make everyone feel welcome, but at the end of the day, you sort of have to take certain calls? How does that work? How do you, you know, toe the balance?
To be honest, because it's a new style and ragas are not, they were very differential. Like Joe Lastie, basically, like, you tell me what you want, what do you hear? John Patitucci, same way. All the musicians, because this is really new ground, and it hasn't really done in the jazz world. They're not They're not calling the shots. They're
Right.
let me shots, which made my, because I just gave them the lead sheet and then told them what I wanted, and it all came together beautifully, because these are not hard. It's just a style. Like there's much harder repertoire written out there, but it's a style. It's using certain ragas and the phrases to improvise, and certain approach, like certain notes that are approached properly, the proper way, and the harmonies that underlie them are not extremely complicated harmonies. Like there's a few chords that are difficult, but by and large they're much, there's sevenths, and some you'll have the sixth or the 13th and the 11th or the 9th, but nothing too crazy out there, and then the talas, the rhythms are Indian rhythms most of the time. But apart from the 7/8, which was a little bit tricky for some people to get, because innately in Indian culture, the 7/8 Rupaka tala is something we grew up with.
Right.
But I found that it was not the case in the jazz world. So apart from, which was a little bit interesting to me to discover, it was wonderful to just hear their interpretations, jazz-like, of what a raga would sound like when it was improvised. So that was the only thing. Give them the lead sheet, the structure, and then improvise in the style that you're used to, and they all did amazingly. Really, it's. But then you're all working with world-class musicians, so it's
of course.
It makes my life such a breeze, really.
Yes, indeed. I mean, even just watching the artwork that you share, with all of them involved in it, is inspiring stuff. It's like seeing a movie poster with all these, each name is a blockbuster, superstar in itself. And the other day Lonnie Park emailed me very humbly saying, "Oh, welcome to the Academy, it's really nice." And I'm like, and my response was, "Oh my God, I'm writing to the Lonnie Park." So and same here, I'm speaking to the Charu Suri. So it's wonderful. It really is. So look, it's time for me now to introduce the third guest in this podcast, because I think now you whetted all, my appetite definitely with all this talk. So I think let us introduce the third guest, which is right next to you, and let us hear something with Charu and the piano.
So this is a Raga Hemant. The title of it is called Bourbon Street Stroll.
Yes.
It's the opening track. Steve Gadd plays on it. And it's the Rupa Katala. So that's even.
So that is 7/8, isn't it? Okay. All right.
Yeah. that's just a sneak peek without all the improvisations and the modulation that goes on of the intro track.
No, that was fascinating. That was fantastic. That really
Yeah, and
was. So do you perform this unplugged, well, let's call it unplugged version ever, like in concerts? Just
a lot. I
right.
played it with a trio in
Yeah,
trio version
yeah,
in Florida. It was wonderful. I had a great show in Ocala,
yeah.
and the light was also beautiful on the stage to
Oh,
suit the time of day that
yeah,
the Raga played.
fantastic.
Um, and then this particular track, when you hear the drumming, Steve's drumming, it takes it to a totally different groove. And Berta Moreno plays the sax on it and improvises, and it turns into something totally different. But I have done trio and even solo piano versions of this because people find the tune so beautiful. I
Yeah.
still have people writing to me saying that they love the Raga hymn and they play it to their child at bedtime before they go to sleep. Yeah.
So let's talk about the Grammys, right? It feels like it's Grammy season. I believe that's what it's called. And I certainly wake up every morning, thinking about the Grammys. So it must be Grammy season. So tell us about your association with the Grammys. How long have you been a voting member? And what's that entire experience like going to the Grammys? And just talk to us about the Grammys.
I've been a member for about 3 years, and I am a member of the New York chapter. It's been unbelievable. I was not sure what to expect, but I found such a loving, caring circle of friends and well-wishers who supported me, listened to my music, been extremely encouraging of this new voice that I'm creating, which, made me feel so happy about what I was doing. Because if you're hearing it from a Grammy member, you probably are on the right path.
Mm, mm,
And people have come up to my shows, they've listened to my music, and I've learned a lot from them. I've
mm,
collaborated with voting members, Grammy members on their albums,
mm,
on their and singles.
mm,
It's been a beautiful symbiotic relationship, gone to a lot of events,
mm,
and it's family. And it's been this extremely encouraging, loving family committed to musical excellence. And even though it's so much work, obviously certain standards and everything they have to be met, I feel like I am finally home,
mm,
really. That's
mm,
the word, finally home.
mm,
Because many musicians go through life trying
mm,
to find the right supportive
mm,
circle of family. And in many cases, that doesn't exist, and they feel
mm,
uh, uneasy. They feel unsure of where they're going.
mm.
Does music make sense? Is it meaningful to someone? Does it make a difference? And then you find the right circle of friends who are just like you and get you, and you don't have to explain at all to
Mm,
anybody. They
mm.
get it, and it's just wonderful when that
No,
happens.
that's fascinating. It's really heartwarming to hear that. And I must say,
Yeah,
ever since the acceptance from the Recording Academy came, and I got to join the family, I suppose. And it's
welcome.
been very no, yeah, and that word, welcome. It's been so welcoming. So thank you, Charu. And I've been receiving emails from multiple Grammy Award winners, and I'm like, mate, that is so endearing to see that
Yeah,
humility, that they took the time to email me. And they didn't really need to. So it's just wonderful, and I can already feel that warmth that you're mentioning. So it's good. And hopefully I get to meet extended members of my family at some point. um,
yes, you absolutely will.
good. Okay, so it brings us to the very last question again. So the first question and the last question are always the same. The answers are different, of course. So we want to know, we talk about the next big thing, and the idea here is to inspire people to get out of whatever, you know, dust off the cobwebs, get out of the rut, and really express themselves creatively to the best of their potential, and become the next big thing. So, according to you, what is one non-negotiable or one must-have? to become the next big thing?
Well, apart from perseverance and excellence at your craft, which I think are sort of non-negotiable, I think really what you need to have is authenticity and sincerity. Really, authenticity is probably the best word to use, because if you're living a lie, if you try to sound like someone else, if you try to copy someone else, you can do it maybe for one record. You can do it for one track. You're not going to be able to sustain a whole career of appearance and performances and recordings doing that. It's just not going to work, because you're going to be burned out. The audience is going to see right through that, and it won't have the power and the passion that you require. You have to really be that. You have to own, have to have the authenticity. That means owning it even on the highs, on the lows. Like some of my best work I've written when I was feeling the absolute pits. Like Ragas and Waltzes, I composed right after my dad died last year. And that was one of the Grammys. I had hit rock bottom emotionally. But everyone says it's like my best work. Well, at that time. And the waltz for my father, I wrote it the day after my dad died. It was just like a moment. Like I was completely lost. I was crying. And I keep reminding myself that, life's not a bed of roses. It's never going to be. You can never find the perfect, cheerful, wonderful moment to write the most amazing tune, because Beethoven wrote his best symphony after he went deaf. And it's about being the artist. It is about owning those heart-wrenching moments along with the very joyous moments when you're on stage receiving standing ovation at Carnegie Hall, getting the medals and awards, etc., going to the Grammys. All those are euphoric moments, but I think authenticity means being real about things. It's never going to be perfect. I've had moments where I'm just like, this is just the worst day ever, and ended up writing my best tune because I go through it. You have to own those, realize that those moments are teaching you something about yourself and your voice as well. So I would say the one non-negotiable for me is the authenticity. It's just your voice. Like, how do you see the world? How do you hear the world?
That's interesting.
Yes. And I've always asked myself that, how do you hear the world? I've heard the world very differently from Debussy heard the world. But if you are inviting people into your world, when you create a sonic tapestry, you're inviting people into your world. So you better be damn sure of what it is that you're inviting people to listen. And not you doing it because someone else told you, or just because this is the way that it's always been done. I've always been referred to as someone who's breaking the mold. That's just because I've always asked myself, why? Why should it be done this way? Why? Why should I have to do this? Is that me? Is that real? Am I feeling that? Do I want to? And in doing so, I'll probably, upset a few people and traditionalists, and I'm like, okay, that's the way it's gonna be, because that's not the way I hear it. That's not the way I see it.
And that's not who I am.
Not who I am. So I think, when I get asked, how do you compose? And I actually posted something on Twitter about last week, which drew a lot of comments on the Hungarian composer Béla Bartók, who is a big influence of mine along with Debussy. Bartók was a classical composer, refused several professorships of composition. He said, I'm not going to accept this because composition cannot be taught. So he really stood yeah, there was like wonderful professorships, I think Columbia, etc. He was offered, he turned it down because he said composition cannot be taught. And that's a brave thing to do, because a lot of us would probably be like, oh, that's a really nice job, it's a good gig, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna have fun with it. I really admire his integrity. He really stood up for what he believed in. And he believed that creation, composition, and the way you do it is very innate and very organic. And I think sometimes you have to make those difficult choices. Like, I chose not to do the traditional jazz route because I know I would do that. I can do it and play the songbook and all the standards. We do that in many concerts, but it wouldn't be true to what I wanted to bring to the table.
No. And if you bring what's been already been served or repackaged, then you don't get you're not remembered for as long as you deserve to be. So wonderful. It's great to see that, and I can see that you talked about being persevering. You obviously persevered over the years. You're excellent at your craft, undeniable. I do think the X factor is coming from you recognizing the importance of being authentic and owning it. And I've had similar journeys in my life. I've worn many hats. I even started my musical journey somewhat falling into the trap of imitating a very famous musician. And I basked in that sunlight for a while, and then I realized that I was the shadow, I was not the person. And a great musician called Shankar Mahadevan from the Indian side of music helped me see that, and he mentored me, and he said that you've got your own voice, find it, express it, and connect with that. So I went on that journey of authenticity and figuring out who I was musically. And so thank you. It really resonates with me is what I was trying to say.
Great.
And again, along the journey, people get very confused with all these hats and who are you? You need to choose. And I'm like, they're all me. You thought your vision out. So
it's very interesting because there's so much pressures and demands from the external world to be something.
Yeah.
It's like how women have to get married and have children by a certain age.
Yeah.
There's so much external pressures that you don't really to find your true self, because the honest reality is, if you're not at peace with yourself, you can't create something genuine and worth believing and listening to, which is why I took a lot of time to find that self before I started putting work out there.
Fantastic. No, I applaud you for going on that journey. I didn't necessarily do that, and there were times where I was exceptionally lost. And I don't know if you can see, but I've got a lot of quotes on in my room. And one of the quotes actually on that side is that world acceptance comes from self-acceptance.
Self-acceptance.
So the moment I invested in that, rather than investing in worldly acceptance, I said, this is who I am. I'm comfortable in my own skin, take it or leave it. That really worked. And even if it doesn't work, I'm still going to do that because that's authentic for me. So anyway, great. So really great. So thank you for sharing that. It resonated very deeply with me, and I'm sure it will with other people as well. All the very best with your journey that lies ahead. I do have a feeling, so let's hope it comes true. And maybe, I'll see you on the 4th of February next year. And
great. Also, Rags and Ragas, we're thinking of putting it at the new in the new alternative jazz category that was just created. It was just here, and I think that is what it is.
It fits. Yeah, it fits.
It's a jazz album. Because when I look at traditional jazz and try to submit in traditional jazz, I was always met with, but this is world, but this is not this, and this is not that. So, and that's always interesting when you're something new, like a voice or genre, to have that. Where do you fit in? And I end the podcast with one amazing quote that I heard from John Patitucci, who I to watch live in performance. I just think he's just an incredible musician, And Jean Baptiste, who actually think won in like some crazy number of categories, 8 or 13 or something like that. I don't remember from the top of my head. Said that if I had my way, I would erase all genres and just let it music.
Here.
Applaud him for that, because it's very restrictive to put music in these categories, and I think you need it for the sake of, you know, playlists and Spotify, and people are like, are you in the mood for new age? Okay, let's go to new age. Are you in the mood to funk? Let's go funk. But you know, it's like having a conversation. You can't always dictate where the style and the mood is going to go. It has to evolve. And one of the reasons I love, say, a musician like Bill Withers, he completely erased the mold on what, you know, a pop song or a funk song should be, or a song should be. It was all of them, all of the above. Yeah. And it was just such a sonic way of, you know, the song. It was amazing. I mean, every song of theirs is like a treasure.
Yes.
And Baptiste said that, I said, wow, I feel at peace now. Well, because if Jean Baptiste says that, then I feel like, that okay,
must be right.
Yeah. And I think that's the danger for musicians when they're starting out, or even in mid-career, or whichever stage you're in, is to second guess yourself. And I say, no, music is music. We're influenced by wonderful sounds. You know, at the end of the day, I always tell, it's about the sound. It's about listening.
Yeah.
Can you admire everything from a pin drop to a train? Like Alan Toussaint, who is the Saint of New Orleans, a huge influence in my work. He has this amazing track called Last Train, which is really imitating the train sounds and the bells as you know, the train passes by.
Yeah.
And that's how much he is listening to the world, and not just noisily, but in a beautiful way. And that's what it's all about. And everyone listens differently. So it's about doing that hum.
Yes. Yes. No, it actually agrees with my philosophy. I feel like if it's pleasant to my ears, it works. So yeah. Beautiful. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your experience, and your, you know, unbridled passion for music. So I love that. I love seeing that. And this is exactly what I needed. And I told you this before, you have made my day. So thank you. So thank you for coming.
Podcast. Thank you for having me, Sriram. Really,
Pleasure.
I'm great.
Pleasure.
Wishing everyone a wonderful day, evening, night, wherever you are in this world.
Thank you.